Hi, welcome to Teachers Talking Teaching, where we celebrate and elevate everything that's amazing about teaching these days. I'm Tracy Bean, classroom teacher, and I'm here with another Tracy, Traci Gile.
Hi, thanks for coming back for our next episode of Teachers Talking Teaching. We're really excited this week to focus on all things related to math and math instruction, particularly this week about math instruction at the elementary level. And I know you, Tracy, you've been studying quite a bit of different strategies for math instruction in your classroom. Do you want to start and tell us a little bit about the focus of your math instruction, how you're continuing to learn and grow as a math teacher?
Yeah, so we have an amazing math facilitator in our district, first of all. So I feel like that has been kind of my impetus for learning over all these years, is being inspired by her. But also, I was an English major in college, so I don't feel like I still feel like I was a decent math student for sure, but I never really understood the why behind math, and that's kind of become my obsession over the years, is to finally understand the why, especially at a elementary level. And so this year, I'm always, we've talked about this before, I'm always reading professional development books, regular books, whatever, kid books. But I picked up the book Building Thinking Classrooms this year in end of October, beginning of November, somewhere in there. And I tend to buy professional development books and then put them away for the summer because who has time during the school year? This one was just there was something about it that just compelled me to start reading it. And I'm also the kind of person who generally tends to read the whole book and then is like, okay, what did I get from that? What can I implement? What can I do?
Oh, you're way better than me. I usually get about halfway through and I'm like, okay, I have enough that I know what I could do with this.
See, that's what I did with this one for the first time. I got about 3 or 4 chapters in, and I think part of it was just simply because teaching elementary math is hard. The range of abilities, not that teaching any level of anything isn't hard for that reason, but especially the range of abilities once they get to 5th grade is huge. And so trying to teach one math lesson that meets everybody's needs, it's impossible. You've got kids who, still aren't adding and subtracting well, and kids who quite honestly could probably move on into algebra concepts and be flourishing. So I feel like especially this year, post-pandemic, of course, the range was even bigger of the needs in my class. And so I just kind of feel like I'm kind of still floundering with trying things out and not necessarily working really great, not feeling really great every day when I would finish math instruction. And so this book just spoke to me. There were so many elements of it. And so it's Peter Liljedahl is the author. And he did 15 years of watching math classrooms, all K through 12, and trying to refine and tweak even just the tiniest little things that teachers did in their classrooms. And some of the moves I felt okay to move with first were shifting the math that we were doing to vertical whiteboards. So as opposed to kids doing it in their book all the time, they're at small groups standing at a whiteboard, the 3 of them working. And that's another piece of it too, is the fact that you do it in small groups. And his big thing too, and this was after years of study, that your groups cannot be made by the teacher. They have to be random, and they have to be randomized every day, because he makes the point that kids know their role. When teachers put them in group, and they pick up very quickly on, I'm the smart one in the group, or I'm the dumb one in the group, which are horrible terms, but kids aren't dumb. And so if you randomize it, then they every day are thinking, wait, I'm not really sure what my role, my role is to work.
And what's my identity as a math student? Like if it's totally randomized by them, then I think that, oftentimes we hear about the research about your math identity starts really early, particularly for girls, and that whether you're good at math or not good at math starts so young. And so that's a really interesting way to mix up that thinking about how you see yourself as a mathematician.
Yeah. And that was huge. That was a huge revelation for me, was that I needed to let go of some control. Like let the cards fall as they may, which is both literal and figurative in this case, because I took a deck of cards, and there's 3 3s, and there's 3 2s, and there's 3 4s, and I have 7 I have 22 kids this year. And so we do 7 groups of 3. I have one student who actually leaves for math for special needs reasons. So I have 21 actually. So it works out perfect. 7 groups of 3, 7 whiteboards in my room, which are converted COVID screens. But when they come into math, I try to do, maybe a 5-minute introduction of that day's lesson, very minimal talk. And then I hand out the cards. And the 4th card, it's great that there's 4 cards in deck, because the 4th card is attached to the board. So they know exactly which one they're going to. So if you are a 2, the 3 2s head over to the 2 board, and that's where they get started.
So I'm picturing, this almost feels like a NASA setup, like a bunch of engineers at this vertical whiteboard, like trying to solve this amazing analogy. Problem.
Yeah.
Is that what it's like? Do you give them the problem that they have to?
And so there's so many elements to Peter's philosophy. And so the beginning pieces of it that I felt okay to implement right away were the vertical whiteboards and the random groups of 3 every day. And those weren't too hard, especially because COVID screens were all over our building. Right. So I just repurposed COVID screens.
Wonderful repurpose of those.
Who knew they were going to come in handy? And so then his philosophy is when you start with non-curricular math activities. So not meaning that they aren't math related, but they're not necessarily exactly the math you're trying to teach that day. So at the time when I made the shift, we were getting ready to start adding and subtracting fractions. So I didn't jump in with adding and subtracting fractions. We did a problem from his book called The Tax Collector, where you're trying to you have 12 envelopes with $1, $2, $3, and it's this whole process where you're trying to make sure that you get to keep, every time somebody has to take an envelope, and you're trying to make sure you keep more money than the tax collector. And each envelope has its the amount of cash, the number that's written on it. So we started with some problems like that where they were math related, and there was certainly math behind it, but they weren't directly related to something related to the standards that I needed them to cover and learn this year. So starting with that, it did kind of feel like more of a NASA engineering problem that they were solving. And then in Peter's book, he talks about thin slicing. And I think this is where I'd always kind of dabbled in when problem solving lessons fit into my math classroom, I would do them. But there were certainly days where it was more, I'm going to show you how to do the math and you're going to sit and do it. And Peter calls that mimicking. And I would say a lot of my lessons were mimicking lessons where I showed them the algorithm and they just regurgitated the algorithm. And so Peter calls it thin slicing instead. So you can still get to your standards, but you try to figure out what are the baby steps to teach them. For example, if you're doing adding fractions, you would start with some fractions that are those benchmark fractions, 1/4 plus 2/4. So give them a problem like that. That's a basic problem. So you're taking a concept and you're slicing it up to the elements that the kids need to get to the big idea that is your standard. So for 5th grade, ultimately it's fractions with different common denominators. So we start with some benchmark fractions and we move into some fractions with the same denominator, and then eventually get to problems that had different denominators. So we're still doing math. It's still, some of it is still just algorithm based, but they're having a chance to process it together. And it's not just me teaching them and them practicing and waiting for me to give them feedback. Turning it in and realizing, oh, I did it all wrong.
So are they giving each other feedback? Is that part of the collaborative whiteboard? And that's where the thinking, like a thinking classroom foundation is? Yeah,
exactly. And Peter, one whole chapter in his book is talking about how you don't give them the answers, which is probably one, like when I think about what I want to work on next year more, it's not coming over and verifying their answer because his argument is they need to have ways to check their own thinking. They need to have ways to prove to themselves that that's the right answer and not necessarily expecting you to be the purveyor of all knowledge. But I'm working on that one still because they still, I think when you start the school year the old way and they're used to you checking their math and giving them that feedback, it's a shift we all are trying to make, and we're making a lot of shifts with all
and
the
it can
changes.
be frustrating too sometimes, like adults and kids were like, just give me the right answer. I just need the right answer. And the struggle can be hard. But that's where the struggle produces growth.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a big piece of the Building Thinking Classrooms book is the putting the responsibility of learning on the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like fifth grade is such a perfect year to do that because they're old enough to start to take that responsibility on, but the stakes are low.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do they need to learn the math? Yes. But as far as grades go, or, college acceptance being based on
Mm-hmm.
that, we've got years still to, finish building out their math knowledge as well as to teach them kind of the repercussions, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, of not doing things right. Like we can make it's a year you can make some mistakes still and kind of learn from those. So that's kind of the big thing is the responsibility piece for the kids take notes, and they call it, and he
Mm-hmm.
calls them notes to my future forgetful self. And so they have I give them a graphic organizer to take when they're working, but it's really up to them to decide, what am I going to write down on this? What's important for me to remember? It's got a section for vocab. And usually that's kind of what I spend the 5 minutes at the beginning is going over new terms that they may
Mm-hmm.
not be common denominator for my example earlier.
Right.
Like those aren't terms you just inherently know
Right.
when you come into fifth grade.
No.
So quick lesson on that. And then they're good to go, or at least go get trying math. So yeah, so the responsibility for taking my own notes, trying to determine what's important, and a lot of modeling in the beginning to help them, it's not like I just handed them that graphic organizer and was like, here, fill it out. They were like, I'm not really sure what to put on this. So we did some times where they took some notes, and then I was like, okay, let's talk about what things you wrote down today, and let's kind of, process what things you could put in your notes. What would be a good idea? Because sometimes I think, too, we don't teach kids how to learn the greatest. So we don't teach them how to take notes or how to study for a test. Yeah. So those kind of skills I feel like are kind of inherent in this process, too. Because if they have to think, hopefully they're going to determine importance, which, is a skill.
Oh, so
to
critical.
Learn.
So
yeah.
So you had to carve out time to do this. There's only so much time of your day.
Yeah.
What did you find yourself like letting go of so you could make time to do this?
Well, thankfully I had an hour and 15 minutes for math already. So it's just enough time. I still wish, I don't know that it matters. Every time if you even increased it by 5, you'd wish for 5 more. But because part of it is we do the vertical whiteboards for about half an hour. So it's a quick introduction, 5 to 10 minutes. I try to keep it as close to 5 as possible. Less me talking, more them working. And then 30 minutes at least of vertical whiteboard work time, and then back to their seats to do what in Peter's book he calls check your understanding, which is really the individual practice, or what used to be maybe the homework. Like if you didn't finish it, you had to take it home for homework. And so then the rest of time is for that. And then I'm still big, this isn't part of the book, but I'm still big on doing a quick exit slip at the end, because I still like to know like who's got it, who doesn't. Let me make adjustments for tomorrow based on that. So I feel like I have just the exact, like the minimum amount of time that I feel like I could fit this all in. So thankfully the hour and 15 minutes is, we use every second of it. So, because another piece of it too, I guess that I forgot to put in there is after our 30 minutes of vertical whiteboard time, there's about 10 minutes of what he calls consolidation, where we come back together. And I have at that point usually taken pictures of some of the work that the kids did, and I'm putting it up on the smart board. Thank God for Google Drive, because I can take pictures on my iPad and it's immediately able to go straight to my smartboard, and then the kids come up and present their thinking, and so it's a chance to share like what was the process, and a chance for me to clarify anything that maybe needed clarified, although I really try not to talk a lot during that. I try. It's the kids sharing, the kids asking each other questions before then they go back and then they get to work, I guess. So yeah.
I love that part of the sharing, like that sharing out of their math thinking. And particularly as they, like, that's one of the things that I find fascinating about, especially an elementary student and their mathematical brain, as they start to process strategies that I would never in a million years think would work. And then when they try it out, it totally works and it makes sense to them. It may not be the most efficient strategy. But it's a strategy that they're starting to conceptually understand how numbers work together, how you can break them apart, how if you do different things to numbers that you can come up with the same result. And it's just really fascinating to have a kid explain their process for how they arrived at an answer.
Yeah, definitely. And the other piece of this is me trying to change too how I'm assessing that learning that has happened, because we switched to standards-based report card last year during COVID. And there wasn't a whole lot of this is what this looks like. So I feel like I was kind of in the dark. Tried to do some work over the summer, and just wasn't finding anything that felt like a great way to do standards-based grading for elementary school. And the district didn't have a strong, like, I think their expectation is that everybody's experimenting with it and figuring out. And I think eventually we'll have more training and as more people have experienced it. But when I jumped into the building thinking classrooms, it was finally, there was a chapter in there that was like my aha moment of setting up the assessment based on columns. And in our case, we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. So my tests have the standard on the left and the kids can see it's, I put it in kid-friendly words, but the standard's on the left column, and then there's a 2 column, a 3 column, and a 4 column on the assessment. And so then the kids have a chance to show me, do you have a 2 understanding? So it's still not quite there. Like you've got parts, bits and parts of it, but maybe not quite all of it yet. 3's proficient. And so I tell the kids now that they have to do the 2 and the 3 columns on the test. The 4 is optional if you want to try to get a 4. And I think the thing that's impressed me the most when I've rolled out these assessments, because this is totally different, like they've never seen anything like this before. How many of them, since the 4 was optional, I was like, nobody, they're going to do the 2s and 3s and turn it in. And that's fine. That's all I expect, really. But I hope they'll do more. The number of kids who are trying the 4s, because they know there's no harm, no foul. Like, I might get a 4 on this, and that'd be awesome. And yeah, so it's been a huge shift for me in almost every practice in my math classroom this year. And I think almost all of it for the positive. I still feel like I have growth to make in bits and pieces of it for sure. Of the 14 practices, I'd say I probably am implementing 9. There's 5 I still need to work on. But I feel like I took more than baby steps this year, at least, to try it out. And I feel like I have enough knowledge under my hat too to help my teammates next year, hopefully get on board with it too. And then we can learn from each other as we go through it. So yeah, it's been a really interesting year. I'm excited to teach math again. I guess that's key too, because I feel like that excitement rubs off.
I think so. I was just going to ask you, what have you seen with the kids and their engagement with math? Like, what have you noticed about them?
Well, I think initially they, especially my, quote unquote, higher kids in math, they didn't like it because they were good at it the old way, and they knew what to expect, and they knew how to give you what you wanted, which so many times is, I think, like they've already figured out how to do school. And so they were kind of frustrated with it because now I'm not sure of I'm not sure exactly what she wants. And now I'm working with these other people and I have to figure out how to like communicate with them how I got what I got. And like one of the rules with the vertical whiteboard, there's lots of them, but one of the main rules is there's only one marker and one eraser, and you're not allowed to write down your own thinking. So if you have a thought and you want to write it down, well, you got to hand the marker to somebody else in your team and you got to convey to them what to write on the board, because I've told the kids, I have to be able to walk over to your group, and if at any time anybody needs to be able to explain to me what you're doing or what your process was to solve the problem. So in order to get there, let's make sure that everybody has a say in what you're actually putting on the board. And so that was frustrating for some of the kids who got it. They just wanted to grab the marker, do it for their team, done. But on the flip side of that, some of my kids who struggle, it has been amazing to see them flourish and to get more confident, especially when I'll come over and I will say, to one of the kids, explain to me what your group did. And they've gotten so much better at saying, I don't understand it yet. Can you come back? And I'll be like, yes. And sure enough, I'll leave and go meet with another group. And by the time
Mm-hmm.
I get back over there, their group has taken the time to actually, explain to them, and now they understand, and now they can explain it to me. Or like you said, sometimes those kids are the ones who come up with some unique workaround
Mm-hmm.
that they're able to show their teammates. So I think that's the piece that makes me the happiest, is to feel like, as opposed to those kids who used to sit at their desks and fail to start because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how to start,
Right.
they can dive right in just with the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the kids. And it's fun when they end up in groups sometimes together, to see them lead each other now and
Mm-hmm.
like step up into that role, whereas they would have been the kid before who would step back and be like, I don't know what we're doing, and so I'm just gonna kind of hang in the
Mm-hmm.
back of my little group here. But now they're like, I can do this just like you can.
Mm-hmm.
So confidence, I feel like, I always joke that elementary school was kind of like, we should take the Hippocratic oath that you should do no harm.
Right.
Like if you kill their
Mm-hmm.
confidence in fifth grade, then
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing to rebuild. So if I
Right.
can send them off thinking they're mathematicians, thinking they're
Mm-hmm.
writers, thinking they're readers, I've done my job, because
Mm-hmm.
they can keep going from there. They can
Right.
learn more content. It's really hard to build the ego
It
of a fifth
is.
grader who
Well,
moves
and you,
on.
yeah, and you stop, as a learner, you stop showing up
Yeah.
when you set that identity. You like you said, you just don't even start.
Yeah.
And that's, one of the hardest things to overcome once that identity kind of sets in, unless something happens that changes it. It sounds like you're changing that math identity.
Trying anyway. Yeah.
Mm.
So you said you were also, I mean, we talked a little too about the challenges of rebuilding confidence,
Ah,
rebuilding the math learning, because at the
right,
elementary level, sometimes you get those fifth graders, you can get
right.
second graders that are the gaps from before. And so you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
a school that you were in doing some great intervention work. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I visited a school who was using a model called Advantage Math, and it's built, their framework is built under math recovery, which is very similar to reading recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and reading recovery being a one on one intensive intervention model. Math recovery started in the same structure with
Mm-hmm.
that one on one intensive approach to mathematics. And one of the interesting things that I've learned about math intervention is it's much harder to remediate than literacy is. Once those misconceptions start
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
about mathematics, like to try and break them apart and break them down and reteach a misconception actually takes almost twice as long as it does for a literacy misconception, or maybe something that's holding a reader back.
Mm-hmm.
It takes much longer for a mathematician. And so that really intensive, very structured intervention is really critical in the younger grades, because if you think about a misconception that continues to build, particularly the foundation of numbers, that it will prohibit someone from being able to access fifth grade math and then some and then some. It will just compound itself
Yeah.
over and over again throughout the years. That the having that building block is so important. But the Advantage Math is really interesting when I've seen it at work, and then hearing one of the math interventionists talk about it. It is very much starting with a diagnostic assessment
Mm-hmm.
about where the mathematician is with their ability to process numbers and to see patterns in numbers, to understand that base 10 system with numbers. So it starts with a pretty intensive interview, probably about a 45-minute interview with a
Mm-hmm.
child, with manipulatives as well as with some, constructed problems. A lot of it mental, though, mental math
Mm-hmm.
processes, and seeing what kids can do and what they're able to do with those patterns. And then from that point, of diagnostic assessment, then that intervention program is very tailored. Like it ends up placing a student into a particular pattern of they need work maybe with subitizing numbers or decomposing. And then that intervention approach is delivered one-on-one most effectively. I think
Mm-hmm.
they've expanded to show that one-on-four works fine,
Mm-hmm.
but one-on-one certainly for the most difficult concepts to
Mm-hmm.
uncover and reteach is what's needed. But just in talking with the interventionist, it was very much the story that you told. A lot of elementary teachers aren't like math content experts. They
Yeah.
didn't start with a bachelor's in mathematics
Right.
or anything like that. And so a lot of his work is teaching the teachers about, this is this is what you're doing when you're teaching math. This is why the algorithm works. This is what this lesson is really getting at conceptually about numeracy. And so part of his work is not only the intervention with the child, but also to work with the staff on those as you're going through your curriculum and as you're introducing these really critical concepts in math, how to conceptually understand what you're doing within that lesson. And a lot of the foundation starts with the mental math work that I've noticed.
Number talk.
Exactly. The number talk, paying attention to what your brain is doing when you're processing numbers and how you do that without pen and paper now as an adult is just kind of an interesting part of that whole process. But it's just inspiring to hear from people, particularly in elementary, who really have a passion for mathematics, because there aren't as many of those folks in elementary school who have that level of expertise. And I'm just grateful that we do, and that we have people who are exploring these different intervention programs for students that are very individualized.
Yeah. I think the part of the key of the building thinking classrooms piece is to find that professional development piece, the connection with other teachers, the vertical alignment of math that we don't always do a great job of because we don't have time to necessarily, we barely have time to meet with our grade level teams, let alone, stretch that out. But I know for me, for this, there's an amazing Facebook group that I've reached out to and both participated in by sharing stuff I've created, stuff I've done, all the standardized tests and stuff that I've created. I've been trying to share those out just to give people hey, here's a building place. This isn't perfect, but give me your feedback or, figure out how can this be tweaked. And it's always amazing when you can connect with other people who are trying things like you are. That aren't even necessarily in your own. I mean, some of these people are from Canada. Peter himself is from Canada. So a lot of the teachers that are in the Facebook group are even from Canada, Australia, kind of around the globe even, sharing ideas for how could we do this better,
Yeah, I think that's what's a great thing about teaching is teachers love to share their good ideas. It's not a profession where people hold their best thinking to themselves. People really do want to grow and learn from one another. And I having that community of professional growth is powerful.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. But I think especially when you're trying something new, because the number of times the teacher will reach out and say, hey, this part of the building thinking classrooms is not working for me. Can you help me figure it out? Right. Or Peter himself actually did a Zoom meeting, I think it was the end of February, and did an hour-long session with everybody who showed up on Facebook that day. And so, to actually get to chat with the author themselves and ask questions and have him answer them directly and, honor the fact that, these are the tricky parts of this and maybe here's some of my suggestions. And it's pretty amazing to have a community when you're trying something new and to feel supported.
Right.
So,
and when those authors show up, we sort of have this teacher geek out moment.
Yeah, totally fangirl.
It is. It's a fan. We have our own set of authors and people that we would name drop and be oh my God, you met him. Oh, that's so great. And people outside of the education world are I don't know
what. Why?
But we definitely have that network of folks that we look to and that we all kind of know and go, you got to meet him. You got to learn from him. Yeah.
I did. In fact, that goes into might as well segue into our top tweet of the week because I kind of have two and one is connected to that. Because Ingrid Law, who wrote the book Savvy, my students love. It's I think they call them magical realism books now. It's kind of a genre where it's a realistic fiction story, but the characters have some element of magic to them. And Ingrid Law is the author of Savvy. So she had posted out there, contact me if your school's looking for any, if your classroom's looking for any authors to come. My spring is pretty open. I was and she said, and I'll do in-person visits along the Front Range. And I was wait, does she live here? Total fangirl moment. And so, I reached out. And so she and I have been communicating by email and hopefully we'll get something set up this spring for the students, for my students to do at least a quick session with her. And then she does writing, creative. She loves working with kids to inspire creative writing. And so I'm hoping maybe next year we can do a little more work with her because apparently I think she's right in Boulder. So
Oh.
she isn't too far away. So yeah, totally geeked out. And if I told anybody else about Ingrid Law, they'd be like, who?
Just a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, even when I tell my students, though, enough of them are readers and have read Savvy and Scumble and her books that they were like, oh, what?
I know. I remember I was in 3rd grade and we had an author come. It was the author of Chocolate Fever. I think it's Robert
Is it Kimmel?
Yes.
Yeah.
He came and he autographed my book. And I was just like, you're famous. Like, you're the author of a book. You're famous.
Yeah.
And just being very impressed with somebody who is an author.
Yeah. They're my biggest fangirl moments, but I'm a reader, so I'm a nerd. Self-proclaimed, happily.
Everybody loves a book nerd.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and my other top tweet of the week was actually related to reading too. We're going to shift from math now over to reading and writing. Since it's March, a few years ago, I had seen a teacher post about a March Madness for poetry, and we do a big poetry unit in December where the kids actually are both reading and writing.
You sent me a picture of this last year. You tried this last year.
Yeah, so I think this is year 3 now where we've done it, and we do the same poems for a while. I need to change it up maybe next year, but for now it's working. And so we finished round 1, so we went from the Sweet 16 to the Elite 8. So when we get back from spring break, which for us is next week, and we'll go on to round 2 of the competitions. And so for round 1, each of the poems have some sort of common theme, or they're both like, there's one day where both of them are Langston Hughes poems. So pick what's your favorite Langston Hughes. There's some sort of connection in round 1. Of course, when you get to round 2, you can't connect them anymore because it's just whoever won for the day. But the kids we read the poems aloud, of course, and then the kids fill out a Google form. It's all in Google Classroom. And so the whole 5th grade does it together.
Oh, nice.
And so we declared a winner each day for the last 2 weeks, and my bulletin board out of my classroom. So I tweeted about that this week. And my bulletin board outside of my classroom has those winners, and we'll keep that going until we declare a champion. And I noticed the other day walking in the halls that one of the 1st grade teachers has March Madness going on as well, but it's picture books, and I hadn't connected that across our building, and so that would be kind of fun too. Cool. I want to chat with her because it might be fun next year to have a 1st and 5th grade, maybe a connected March Madness, or a whole school March Madness for picture books or something. So maybe next year I'll get more creative than just my own poetry, but
it probably gets kids really excited about poetry because poetry can be a hit or miss with kids.
Yeah, well, and as part of the Google form, the last question is, why did you like it? And it's a required question, so they can't just vote and go away. And then I take their comments and I make them thought bubbles up on the board with who won. And it's cute to see their thoughts. Like, there's a lot of, it was shorter, I liked it better. Or it rhymed, I liked it because it rhymed. But there's a lot of times that they will get into the depth of the poem. There were some this week where the kid said, one kid said it spoke to my heart. Aww. And I was like, okay, I hope you're not just saying that because you think that's what your teachers want to hear. But, occasionally they'll say, there was 2 this week that were funny, and so they'll say simple things like, it just made me laugh. And I'm like, that's good too. Cause I tried to, when I picked the poems originally, I tried to make sure that we kind of covered the gamut, boys, girls, like, people of color and versus not them all just being old white men. Even in fact, one of the days is a Tupac Shakur, lyrics from The Rose That Grew in the Concrete, not the whole song, because the whole song is not fully appropriate, but the parts that are, just to try to show them too that, music itself is also poetry, and we can honor that. So yeah, I tried to run the gamut: funny, serious, deep, sports. It kind of covers it all. So it's fun. So
that's fun. Yeah. Very inspiring for the kids.
Yeah.
Nice.
So what was your top tweet of the week?
So my top tweet, Read Across America week last week. And last year during the pandemic, I felt so sad for these kindergartners, and that last year was kind of their first school experience, like from beginning to end. Rough. And so about this time last year, I really just felt like they needed a gift. And I I'm always inspired by Dolly Parton and her imagination
Mm-hmm.
library and how she gives books to children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I'm going to have my Dolly moment and I'm going to buy books for all of the kindergartners
That's
across all
amazing.
of our schools. And so did that again this year and then invited guests in to do read alouds. And one of our guests who did the read aloud that I talked about in our tweet was our superintendent, and he read Pete the Cat. He
Uh-huh.
read several Pete the Cat books to kindergartners, and it was the most amazing performance of just the
Yeah.
kids laughing and
Because he sang it
singing.
too
Oh
from
my
a tweet I
gosh,
saw.
yes, he
Yeah.
did. You just laughing and singing. And I think people people need to have those happy moments. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you aren't in a classroom every day, we need to find opportunities for people to experience a classroom. There's such
Yeah.
joy.
The
Like,
community connection. Yeah, because the mayor, I think, was
mm-hmm,
at our
yes,
school. And to
yes.
have that community
Mm-hmm.
connection is amazing. Yeah.
I think that community connection just builds the appreciation for education and the
Mm-hmm.
foundation that it holds in our community, like bringing in guests or bringing in people who don't necessarily spend all of their days in the classroom. I think it's just really important to see what the day looks like for little people
Mm-hmm.
in our town, and to have them see that other people, care about them, care about their success, care about their
Yeah.
classroom. I think it's just a really, really fun part of that. Anytime we can have community members or guests come in.
And new books.
And new
Who does
books.
not love a new book?
Oh my gosh, I love a new book.
I was so
Oh.
excited today because we were leaving for spring break.
Mm-hmm.
It's Friday. And I had made a Scholastic book order and ordered some books for myself because Scholastic sent me a $50 American Express gift card. I'm sure there's a reason. I know there's a couple of reasons. There could be that. They had issues in the fall with delivery. It could have been that. I actually think it was because my students entered a writing contest.
Okay.
And so they must have done like a random drawing of some of the teachers. So anyway, they sent me $50, so I spent it. And I'm still excited to get new books.
Oh my gosh.
Because
I
today,
remember doing the book order when I was a
Yeah.
kid and how much fun that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, our school secretary came in because they weren't supposed to get here till Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So I had emailed her to say, watch for my books over spring break. And she came today and she was like, they came. And I'm like, oh yes.
The best day ever.
Yeah.
Whole pile of books.
Exactly.
So
and
did you pick one to take to
I
read
did
on spring break?
Yeah, no, I brought them. I did bring them home to add to my ever-growing pile. But actually what happened was I opened the box and we were taking a science test after lunch, which is when I opened them. The kids were working and I opened the box and the kids, of course, were all like, what's that? I think about 5 of them went home immediately with the kids because they couldn't wait. And I was like, I'm totally fine with, like, I've never read these books either. So you got to take care of it because I still haven't read it. But I was like, my only rule is then after you read it, you got to come back and give me a review. Tell me, is it worth my time? So I love that too. Like, that's probably what's the most exciting to me is when I can manage to get kids excited about a book, especially kids who aren't normally. So one of the students who took one of them is a kid who, is kind of about reading. And she saw one of them and was like, is that one up for grabs? Can I take that one? I was like, yeah, just let me stamp my name in it and, send it home. Absolutely.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
So I brought home a few of them, but not as many as I actually had to start with. So
a lovely gift going into spring break.
Exactly.
So speaking of the week before spring break, where'd your week stand on the chocolate barometer?
Well, the book order, just took that down from, it was probably, today was a little bit crazy. I'm going to go for about a 5. Crazy today because, you're trying to finish all, they're going to forget everything you've taught them in the week. They're off. So we were trying to, finish all the projects. Book reviews were due today. There was just a lot we were trying to cross off the plate and a lot that kids, again, it's a great time to learn to fail. Some of them fell on their faces this week because they knew they had all this stuff we were trying to finish before. And then, they ended up having to spend some of their free time today. We have Friday fun in the mornings. And I didn't have very many kids who thought Friday fun was very fun today because they were catching up on work. So today was a little crazy trying to get out the door with as much done as possible. But overall, the week was pretty fun, actually, because we finished our chemistry unit, which is the science test we took today, and we were doing chemical reactions.
Oh,
and it's just always a fun unit. It's a little bit of chaos, but I took such fun, great pictures of the kids wearing their science goggles. And they just feel like real scientists wearing their goggles and actually getting to mix things that fizz and bubble. And, part of the experiments are in plastic baggies to prove to them that gas is part of a chemical reaction because you're capturing the gas. So, of course, they get all excited because the baggies look like they're going to blow up.
Right.
And, of course, they don't. But so we had a lot of fun with science this week. And we had the symphony
oh my gosh,
first field trip in 2 years.
I know. I think we had rescheduled it 3 times.
Yes.
Like every time we try and plan it, there'd be an
Omicron
and and so when I wasn't able to go this week, but I saw like all the like wonderful news about the symphony and how fun it was for the kids.
The kids and my kids were amazing. Like they were on their best. They dressed. I told them they needed to dress up. You dress up to go to the symphony. Boys showed up in collared shirts. A bunch of the girls wore dresses. They dressed up. They were so cute. They were on their best behavior. They were all so polite during the symphony. And one of my kids, when we were leaving, because it was a story that was being told through music as well as a narrator person. And so as part of the story, it was a ferret that had basically was part of the symphony and, of course, was scaring all the musicians. So they had to play intentional wrong notes when the ferret was scaring them. And his comment was, they did really good playing wrong notes. And I was like, I think that's a compliment. So, yeah.
You should have him write that to the symphony director.
I sent it to the music, the person in charge of music at the district. I said, well, here's one of my students' comments from the
appreciation.
The day.
One of the things I just felt was just tremendous appreciation that, we're not a huge town, but the opportunity for our kids to go to symphony is just such a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing thinking about that community investing in our kids.
And
I love
the
that.
bus drivers too, that it takes to make that happen. Right. I mean, for all of them to agree to work the entire day, basically, of shuttling kids to and from, it's a crazy event, but it went off. But our session went off flawlessly, so it was a great experience. So, and to be back on a field trip is just, I know, it felt weird and wonderful at the same time.
Right.
So, yeah. How about your chocolate barometer this week? What kind of week did you have?
Oh my gosh, I feel like it was off the chart. It was such a hard week. Yeah, I feel like
the year. But I saw something the other day that said the year before spring break, like the month, the 2 weeks before.
Yes, yeah, it definitely
feel like a whole year.
Yeah, felt like 3 or 4 weeks crammed into a week. Like everybody trying to hit that. Like we must do X, Y, or Z before spring break. Is what it felt like. So I would say it was definitely up there like 9 or 10 on the chocolate barometer. Just constant meeting after meeting, late night, parent meetings, school board meetings, community meetings, all good stuff, just absolutely exhausting.
Relentless
and absolutely exhausting.
Yeah.
So looking forward to not having to sustain myself with chocolate maybe as much next week that, kind of reel it back in after this week. It's all about balance.
Yeah. And our family gets on a plane tomorrow and I have my Kindle loaded with at least 10 books. I should be good for the week.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Whole week of just relaxation, hopefully, and family time and reconnecting with myself and my family.
Right.
Amazing.
So, Tracy, I know you're getting on a plane. I hope you enjoy your spring break. You have deserved a long rest, a week of no work and just relaxation. It's been a hard school year on all of our teachers. And if you're somebody who's a teacher and listening to our podcast, enjoy a restful week if you're getting a spring break here soon. So thank you for joining Teachers Talking Teaching.
If you liked what you heard today, we would love for you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can also just listen on your favorite podcasting app. We'll see you next time.